I was sitting by the wide glass window of my office, the city skyline glowing under a golden dusk. The silk of my blouse clung softly to my skin, still warm from the afternoon sun, and the faint hum of traffic below filled the silence, like white noise. My phone buzzed against the desk. Once, then again, a message flashing across the screen. It was from my mother. "We're coming to visit. The whole family. Hope you're ready." My fingers tightened around the edge of the desk. I hadn't seen them in months, and even then, the last encounter had left scars no one else could see. People in my world, colleagues, clients, acquaintances, thought I had it all together. They saw the polished woman who managed everything with ease, the one who never faltered. What they didn't see was the little girl still inside me, the one who had once stood frozen on a staircase, heartbreaking as her parents announced that her children weren't special enough to deserve the upstairs bedrooms in their home. Instead, they'd said the golden grandchild, my sister's son, deserved the privilege, while my kids were sent to the basement like afterthoughts. The memory stung even now, years later, as if it had happened yesterday. And as I stared at that message, I knew their visit wasn't just a casual family stop. It was the past, clawing its way back into my carefully built present. I was 28 the day it happened, still trying to balance being a young mother with holding on to scraps of my own identity. My husband, Daniel, and I had packed the car full of snacks, diapers, and toys before driving 6 hours to spend a summer week at my parents' house in Vermont. My kids, Emily and Noah, were only 6 and 4 then, full of laughter, sticky fingers, and the kind of energy that kept me both exhausted and alive. When we arrived, the front yard was already buzzing. My sister, Allison, was there with her son, Tyler. He was the same age as Emily, but treated like some sort of prodigy. Every scribble he made was art. Every word he spoke, genius. I'd learned to bite my tongue over the years, but I wasn't prepared for what came next. That evening, as we unpacked, my parents called everyone into the living room. My mother's voice rang with excitement. "We've decided the upstairs bedrooms will be for Tyler. He deserves the best space, the light, the views. The basement will be just fine for Emily and Noah. Children adapt." Her words sliced through me like glass. The lump in my throat grew so tight, I could barely swallow. I glanced at my kids, who didn't yet understand the insult, their small hands tugging at my dress, asking which room would be theirs. My heart broke knowing it would be the cold, windowless basement with its musty smell and concrete walls. Daniel's jaw tightened, his hand gripping mine under the table, but he didn't speak. Neither did I. I could feel the sting of shame, hot and heavy in my chest. My parents' eyes sparkled with pride for their golden grandchild, while mine, my babies, were cast into the shadows. Later that night, I tucked Emily and Noah into cots in that basement. Emily whispered, "Mommy, why do we have to sleep here? Don't they like us?" My hands shook as I stroked her hair. I lied, telling her it was just temporary, that it was like camping. Inside, though, something shifted. The next morning, as I packed my bag to leave early, I found an old locket tucked in my purse. It had been my grandmother's, a woman who had always told me, "When the world pushes you down, stand taller. Don't let anyone decide your worth." I held that locket tight, feeling her strength flow through me. That was the moment I knew I couldn't raise my children in a world where they were treated as less. I wouldn't let their sense of worth be defined by anyone, not even family. So I walked out, and I didn't look back. Leaving my parents' house that summer felt like slamming a door on a version of myself I could no longer be. We drove back to Boston in silence, the kids asleep in the back seat, Daniel gripping the wheel tighter than usual. I stared out the window, clutching my grandmother's locket. The basement air, the sting of my mother's words, the look of pride she reserved only for Tyler, it all replayed in my head. Shame had turned into fuel. I didn't have a master plan, but I had resolve. Back then, we were just getting by. Daniel worked long hours as a civil engineer, and I juggled part-time jobs while trying to make sense of who I wanted to be. The turning point came when I spotted a flyer at the local library for a women's business development workshop. Something in me, maybe my grandmother's voice, said, "Go." The first night, I walked into a cramped room full of strangers, feeling like an imposter. But then I met Marlene, a sharp, silver-haired woman who ran her own interior design firm.
She saw something in me.
"You have an eye," she told me after I shyly sketched a redesign idea during one of the exercises. "Don't waste it." Marlene became my mentor, pushing me harder than I thought I could handle. She taught me about contracts, clients, branding. There were nights I stayed up until 2 a.m. after putting the kids to bed, sketching layouts and teaching myself design software with free YouTube tutorials. I burned with exhaustion, but also with purpose. The first time I landed a paying client, a small cafe owner who wanted a cozy new look, I almost cried signing the check. It wasn't much, but it was mine. Slowly, word spread. A boutique hotel hired me. Then a law firm. Each project built my confidence, and soon I wasn't just surviving, I was creating something of my own. Still, I kept quiet around my parents. Phone calls with my mother stayed surface level. I shared pictures of the kids, updates about school, never mentioning the contracts piling on my desk or the way my calendar filled months in advance. They thought I was dabbling in little side projects. That was fine by me. Let them underestimate. Meanwhile, Emily and Noah grew up watching me hustle. They saw the late nights, the sketches scattered on the floor, the pride in every finished project. We didn't talk about that summer in Vermont, but the memory lived in all of us, a silent pact that we were worth more than the basement. By the time I turned 35, I had launched my own firm, E&N Designs, named after my children. What started in a tiny corner of our apartment now stretched into a full office space downtown with a small but fierce team of women who believed in what we were building. Clients came from across the country. And still, my parents had no idea. To them, I was the same daughter they'd once dismissed. The one who never seemed to measure up to Allison and her golden child. That secret, I realized, was my power. The knock at my door came on a crisp Saturday morning, sunlight spilling across the hardwood floors of my home. My kids, teenagers now, were sprawled on the sofa, half watching some Netflix series. When I opened the door, there they were, my parents, Allison, and her son Tyler, now grown but still carrying himself like the world was his to inherit. I invited them in with a calm smile, though my pulse thudded in my ears. They hadn't been to my home before. I'd always deflected with excuses. Too busy. The place is a mess. But this time, I let them step into my world. Their eyes darted immediately around the entryway. The foyer opened into high ceilings, sunlight streaming through floor-to-ceiling windows. A polished walnut staircase curved elegantly to the second floor. On the walls hung framed sketches and photographs, Emily's photography, Noah's early drawings, displayed proudly like masterpieces. I saw Allison's lips part in surprise, her gaze snagging on the oil painting in the living room. My mother trailed her hand across the marble counter in the kitchen, whispering, "Oh my father stayed quiet, his eyes narrowing as if he couldn't quite process what he was seeing. "Lovely place," Allison finally said, her tone too tight to pass as casual. "Thank you," I replied. I motioned toward the dining room, where fresh flowers stood in a crystal vase. Every detail of this home was a chapter of my journey, and I wanted them to feel it all. We sat down, the silence heavy. Tyler pulled out his phone, barely glancing up. My mother cleared her throat. "So, this is yours?" I smiled faintly.
"Yes."
"All of it." Her eyebrows pinched. "And Daniel?" "Daniel's proud," I said evenly. "But this," I gestured around the house, "this is mine. My company built this. My work paid for this." Allison laughed lightly, almost a scoff. "Interior design, right? I thought it was just small projects." I leaned forward, resting my elbows on the table.
"It was.
10 years ago. Now E&N Designs has offices in 3 states. Our client list includes Fortune 500 companies. Last quarter alone, we closed over $8 million in contracts." The words landed like thunder. My mother blinked, lips parted. My father's jaw slackened. Even Tyler's attention flickered up from his phone. "You?" My father finally muttered, disbelief dripping from the single word.
Yes. Me.
I let the silence stretch, savoring the way the air shifted. For years, they had cast me as the struggling daughter, the one whose children weren't good enough for the upstairs rooms. Now they were sitting inside a house those same children had inspired me to build. Emily walked into the room then, a glass of water in her hand. "Mom, Noah's asking if we should order lunch," she said casually, then froze when she noticed the guests. My mother's gaze lingered on her, almost studying, as if seeing her granddaughter for the first time. I placed a hand on Emily's shoulder. "This is Emily, the basement child. She's now applying to top universities with a portfolio strong enough to make professors pause." Emily gave a polite nod and slipped away, her confidence radiating in every step. I turned back to my parents. "You told my kids once they weren't special enough. That Tyler deserved the light, the view, the space. You were wrong. My children shine brighter than any room you could have given them. And my voice steadied, I've built a life where no one can put them in the basement again." Silence. Pure, heavy silence. My mother's eyes shimmered, though whether with shame or defensiveness, I couldn't tell. Allison sat stiff, Tyler fidgeting. My father cleared his throat but said nothing. I leaned back in my chair, the power finally mine. I let the silence linger until it became almost unbearable. For once, I wasn't the one shrinking into the background, waiting for their approval. They were the ones fumbling for words in my space. Finally, my mother spoke. "We didn't mean to hurt you or the kids. We just thought." I raised a hand gently, cutting her off. "You thought Tyler was the golden one. You thought my children could be tucked away in a basement and that I would swallow it. I did, for a time. But I'll never let that happen again." My father's eyes narrowed, pride battling with something softer. "So, what are you saying? That you don't need us?" I inhaled slowly, feeling the weight of the moment. "I don't need you, but I have a choice now. If you want to be in our lives, there will be conditions." Allison shifted in her seat. "Conditions?" "Yes." My voice didn't waver. "First, my children will be respected, not compared,
Not diminished.
They are not basement kids. They are brilliant, resilient young people who deserve to be celebrated." I saw my mother swallow hard, guilt flickering in her eyes. "Second," I continued, "if you want to spend time with us, favoritism ends. Tyler can be loved without my kids being dismissed. You don't get to crown one child while ignoring the others." Allison bristled, her lips tightening, but I pressed on. "Third, honesty. No more pretending things never happened. You dismissed me, and you hurt my children. If you're going to be in this house, in their lives, you will acknowledge it. Healing only happens when truth comes first." My father shifted uncomfortably, but he didn't argue. That in itself was telling. "And finally," I said, leaning forward, "respect me. Not as your daughter, who once asked for scraps of approval, but as the woman who built this life. You don't have to understand every choice I made, but you will respect them." The room was heavy with tension, but also clarity. I wasn't yelling. I wasn't angry. I was steady, composed, and unshakable. That was the difference. Allison finally broke the silence. "And what if we don't agree to your terms?" I gave her a small smile. "Then you'll see less of us. I won't expose my kids to old wounds anymore. They've worked too hard. I've worked too hard to go backward." Tyler cleared his throat awkwardly. "Aunt Claire, I didn't know they said that stuff about us. About the rooms." His voice was tentative, almost guilty. For the first time, I softened. "I know you didn't, Tyler. This was never about you. But it's time your grandparents understood what damage favoritism does." My mother's shoulders sagged. For the first time in years, she looked smaller to me. "We were wrong," she whispered. "I see that now." I nodded, holding her gaze. "Then prove it. With actions, not just words." And in that moment, the power that had once been stripped from me was finally mine to give or withhold. The weeks that followed were cautious, almost fragile, but something had shifted. For the first time, my parents didn't show up with gifts for only Tyler or compliments that skipped over Emily and Noah. Instead, they asked about their college applications, their projects, their dreams. My father even sat through one of Noah's robotics competitions, clapping awkwardly, but sincerely, when his team won second place. It wasn't perfect. Old habits die hard. But for the first time, effort was there. My mother sent Emily a text after seeing her latest photography online. "Your eye for light is incredible. I'm proud of you." I saw the way Emily's face softened reading it, though she tried to hide her smile. I wasn't naive, I knew healing wasn't instant. But I also knew that boundaries had forced change, and that my children finally felt seen. That was worth everything. One night, after the house had quieted, I sat at my desk. The locket from my grandmother lay open beside me, the tiny picture of her still smiling, still urging me to stand taller. I traced the outline with my finger, tears filling my eyes, not of pain this time, but of gratitude. I thought of that basement, the smell of damp concrete, the sound of my daughter's small voice asking if her grandparents didn't like her. And then I thought of now, my children standing proudly in the light, unafraid of their worth. Family had once tried to write the script of our lives, pushing us below, but I had rewritten it. Not with anger, but with strength, with persistence, with love that refused to dim. I glanced out the window at the city skyline, a reflection of all the battles I had fought and won. My voice, steady and certain, filled the silence of the room as if narrating the final chapter of my own story. They once said my children belonged in the basement. But I built them a world upstairs, and no one will ever banish them again.